Hello, and a huge welcome to the channel. If you're looking for cross-dressing stories that are emotional, intriguing, and truly empowering, you've come to the right place. Mom, if I told you that I want to live as a girl, what would you do? The air in the room went still, sucked into a vacuum of shock. The hum of the bathroom fan suddenly sounded like a jet engine. And in that ringing silence, my old life ended and a new one, terrifying and unknown, began to stir. Part 1. The Confession in the Night. A secret is heavier than the body that carries it. Secrets have a physical weight. I'm convinced of it. For years, mine had been a lead apron draped over my shoulders, pressing down on my lungs, making every breath a conscious effort. By the time I turned 18, the weight was unbearable. I was Evan Miller, the good student, the quiet son, the boy who aced his SATs and never missed curfew. On paper, I was the model American teenager. In reality, I was a ghost haunting a body that felt like a stranger's. The haunting began early. I remember being 7, at my aunt's house for a barbecue. While the other boys were chasing each other with water guns, I slipped into my cousin Sarah's room. It was a wonderland of pink and white. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. On her bed lay a simple cotton sundress, pale yellow with tiny blue flowers. I touched it. The fabric was so soft, so light, on a whim, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pulled off my sweaty t-shirt and shorts and slipped the dress over my head. It was too big, hanging off my bony shoulders. But as I looked at my reflection in her vanity mirror, a strange sense of rightness settled over me. For a fleeting moment, the boy in the mirror vanished, replaced by a softer, gentler outline. Then I heard footsteps, and I scrambled to change back, my hands shaking, the thrill curdling into a thick, hot shame. That shame became my constant companion. Throughout my teenage years, the secret grew teeth. I'd steal my mum's magazines, not for the swimsuit models, but for the articles on skincare and the advertisements for perfume. I learned to clear my browser history with the precision of a spy. I became an expert in excuses. No, I don't want to go to the pool party. Because I can't bear to see my flat, hairy chest next to the other boys. Sorry, I have to study. Because the thought of trying to act manly at a football game makes me want to crawl out of my skin. Each attempt to privately explore this hidden part of myself ended in failure and self-loathing. I once tried on one of Sarah's old cardigans I'd found in a box of hand-me-downs. The fabric was soft, but my shoulders strained against the seams. I'd smear a bit of her tinted lip balm on my lips and stare at myself. But all I saw was a boy with a square jaw and chapped, unnaturally pink lips. The reflection was a mockery, a broken version of the girl I saw in my mind's eye. It reinforced the terrifying thought that I was a freak, a glitch in the system. The pressure of my senior year of high school was the final straw. College applications, final exams, the constant question of what are you going to do with your life? It all felt like a tidal wave threatening to pull me under. I stopped sleeping. Food tasted like ash. I snapped at my parents for no reason. The guilt immediately eating me alive. I was a wire pulled too tight, ready to snap. And on a Tuesday night in October, it did. I was in the master bathroom, a place I often retreated to because it had a lock and was the farthest from my dad's home office. I was sitting on the cold tile floor, leaning against the bathtub, holding a bottle of glittery nail polish I'd shoplifted from a drugstore months ago. It was called Fairy Dust. Just holding the small glass bottle felt like a transgression. I stared at my reflection in the polished chrome of the faucet. The distorted, fisheye version of my face looked grotesque. The sharp angles, the shadow of stubble on my upper lip, the sad, tired eyes. A wave of revulsion and despair washed over me so powerfully that a sob ripped itself from my throat. I clamped my hand over my mouth, but it was too late. Another followed. Then another. They were dry, gut-wrenching sobs, the kind that come from a place of absolute hopelessness. I was crying for the girl I couldn't be, And for the boy, I couldn't stand being. I didn't hear the soft click of the door opening. Evan. My mother's voice sliced through my misery. I looked up, my vision blurred with tears. Laura Miller stood in the doorway, a wicker basket of clean laundry propped on her hip. Her expression was one of mild annoyance, probably about to ask why I was hogging the bathroom, but then her eyes focused on me. She saw my tear-streaked face, my shaking shoulders, my white-knuckled grip on the bottle of nail polish. Her face softened instantly, the annoyance melting away into pure maternal concern. Honey, what is it? What's wrong? She dropped the laundry basket, folded towels tumbling onto the floor, and rushed to my side. She knelt in front of me, her knees cracking softly on the tile. Her hand, warm and familiar, landed on my shoulder. Are you sick? Did something happen at school? I couldn't speak. The words were a tangled knot in my throat. All the lies I had constructed over the years felt flimsy and useless. I shook my head, unable to meet her gaze. Please talk to me. Evan, you're scaring me. Her voice was laced with a gentle panic that only made me feel worse. This was it. The precipice. I could invent another lie. Tell her I was stressed about a test, and she would probably believe me. We could go back to the suffocating status quo. Or I could jump. I could let the secret out and risk destroying everything. I looked at her then, at her kind, worried blue eyes, and realized I was too exhausted to keep climbing. I was ready to fall. Mom. The word came out as a strangled croak. I took a shuddering breath, the air burning my lungs. I closed my eyes. If I told you that I want to live as a girl, what would you do? The question hung in the air between us, fragile and monstrous. The room plunged into a profound silence. My mother's hand froze on my shoulder. She didn't pull it away, but all the warmth seemed to drain from it. I watched her face, a canvas where a storm of emotions was playing out: confusion, disbelief, a flicker of something I couldn't name, and then a deep, unsettling stillness. The dam inside me broke completely. The fear of her reaction was more terrifying than the secret itself. I'm sorry, I gasped, the words tumbling over each other. I'm so sorry, forget I said that. It was stupid. I'm just tired. Please. Mom, I'm sorry. I tried to stand, to run, to rewind time, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I expected yelling. I expected disgust. I expected her to get up and walk away, leaving me alone on the cold floor. But she didn't. She simply sat back on her heels, the shock slowly receding from her eyes, replaced by an intense, searching gaze. It was a look that bypassed Evan the good student, and saw, for the first time, the terrified creature hiding underneath. She wasn't looking at a son who had said something strange. She was looking at a child who was in immense pain. In that moment, a tiny, paradoxical feeling bloomed in my chest amidst the terror relief. The secret was out. The weight was no longer just mine to carry. It was now sitting in the space between us, real and tangible. And I was both horrified and profoundly, desperately glad. If you've been fighting this hard to be yourself, do I have the right to refuse ye? The rest of that night was a tiptoeing act of avoidance. My mom, her face pale and unreadable, had helped me up from the floor. Go to bed, Evan, she'd said, her voice flat. We'll talk in the morning. It wasn't a promise, it was a postponement of the verdict. I didn't sleep a single minute. I lay in my bed, staring at the familiar patterns of shadows on my ceiling, replaying the scene in the bathroom over and over. I dissected every flicker of emotion on her face, every nuance in her tone. The silence that followed my confession was worse than shouting would have been. Shouting would have been a clear rejection. Silence was a void, and my terrified mind rushed to fill it with the worst possible scenarios. She thinks I'm a pervert. She's ashamed. She's calling a therapist right now, one who will fix me. She's telling Dad. The thought of my father, Marcus, finding out sent a jolt of ice through my veins. He was a good man, a provider. But he was a man of black and white, right and wrong, boys and girls. My confession would be a foreign language to him, an aberration he wouldn't know how to process. As the sun began to cast a weak grey light into my room, I felt a deep, hollow dread. I had broken our family. The perfect, stable life my parents had built was now fractured, and it was my fault. I considered packing a bag. I could just leave, disappear. It would be easier for them. Eventually, the smell of brewing coffee drifted up from the kitchen. A scent so painfully normal it felt like a cruel joke. I knew my dad had already left for a 3-day business trip to Chicago. It was just me and her. I finally forced myself out of bed, my limbs feeling heavy and disconnected. Walking down the stairs felt like walking to my own execution. She was sitting at the kitchen table, a full mug of coffee untouched in front of her. She wasn't reading the newspaper or scrolling on her phone. She was just staring at the floral pattern on the tablecloth, her mind clearly miles away. The silence was thick, charged with unspoken words. "Sit down, Evan," she said, her voice quiet but firm. She didn't look at me. I pulled out a chair and sat, my hands clenched into fists in my lap. I braced myself for the lecture, for the disappointment, for the tears. "I didn't sleep last night," she began, finally lifting her eyes to meet mine. They were red-rimmed and tired. "I just kept thinking. I replayed your whole childhood in my head." I held my breath. "I remembered how much you loved playing with Sarah's dolls, and how you'd cry when your grandpa told you it was for girls. I remembered how you used to sneak into my closet and just touch my dresses. I always thought it was just a phase, something you'd grow out of." Her voice was laced with a sorrowful sort of wonder. "And then I thought about the last few years, how you've become so withdrawn, the excuses to not go out with friends, the way your grades have started to slip, even though you study all the time, the dark circles under your eyes." She took a shaky breath. "I've been watching you fade, Evan. And I didn't know why. Last night, it was like a key turning in a lock. I didn't even know was there." I felt a lump forming in my throat. This wasn't the conversation I had prepared for. "I'm not going to lie to you," she continued, her honesty a sharp, clean pain. "I don't understand this. At all. It frightens me. I think about the world, how cruel people can be. And the thought of you facing that, it makes me sick with worry." "I know," I whispered, the words barely audible. "I'm scared too." That simple admission seemed to change something in her. She reached across the table, her hand covering mine. Her skin was warm. "But you're my child," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "And when I saw your face last night, the pain in your eyes, I realized you've been fighting a war all by yourself. The world might be cruel, but your own home should never be." Tears I didn't know were left in me began to well up. "Okay," she said, as if coming to a decision right there at the table. She squeezed my hand. "So, we're going to do this. Your dad is gone until Sunday night. That gives us a window. This Saturday, you and I are going to have a day. No hiding. No stealing things in secret. If you need to try this, to see who she is, then you are going to do it safely. With me." I stared at her, my mind reeling. I couldn't process it. It was too much. It was everything I had never dared to hope for. A strangled sob escaped my lips. You'd really do that? You'd help me?" A small weary smile touched her lips. "I'm your mother. Evan, it's my job to help you figure out who you are, even if it scares the hell out of me." She finally picked up her coffee mug. "Now, eat something. You look like a ghost." The tension in the room didn't vanish, but it transformed. The heavy, suffocating silence was replaced by a fragile, buzzing energy, a mixture of my own frantic hope and her nervous determination. I was still terrified, but for the first time, I wasn't terrified alone. The body changes, but the feelings change faster. The days leading up to Saturday were a strange, surreal limbo. Mom and I didn't talk about the plan again. We went about our lives, school for me, work for her, in a state of unspoken agreement. But something had shifted between us. She looked at me differently, with a new kind of attention, as if she were trying to see the invisible girl I had told her about. I, in turn, felt a profound and terrifying vulnerability around her. She held my deepest secret in her hands, and I had no choice but to trust her. When Saturday morning finally dawned, a nervous energy crackled through the house. I felt like I was about to walk on stage for a performance I hadn't rehearsed, in a play I hadn't read. After a breakfast I could barely eat, Mum looked at me, took a deep breath, and said, "Okay, let's begin." She led me to her master bathroom, a space that had always felt like her sacred territory, smelling of her perfume and expensive soaps. Today, it felt like a laboratory, an operating theater. "Take off your clothes and wrap yourself in a towel," she instructed, her voice all business. "I'll be back in a minute." I did as she said, my fingers fumbling with the buttons of my shirt, standing there, clad only in a fluffy white towel. I felt utterly exposed. The mirror reflected the same body I hated: bony knees, hairy legs, a pale torso that was too wide at the shoulders and too narrow at the hips. I was a poorly carved statue, all wrong angles and rough edges. Mom returned carrying a shopping bag I hadn't seen before. Her face was a mask of calm, but I could see the tension in her jaw. "Just relax," she said, her voice softer now. "Every step has a purpose. We have to start with the canvas." 1. The sensation of skin. Her first step was methodical. She handed me a tube of depilatory cream. "Shaving will leave you with bumps and cuts if you're not used to it," she explained, her tone clinical. "This is gentler. Start with your legs, put it on thick, wait 10 minutes, and then shower it off." I took the tube into the walk-in shower, my hands trembling. The cream was cool and thick, and smelled faintly of chemicals and something vaguely floral. Spreading it over my calves and thighs felt like a ritual. It was a strange, tingling sensation. After 10 minutes, that felt like an hour. I turned on the water. As I rinsed, I watched in utter fascination as clumps of my dark, coarse hair washed away, swirling down the drain like a part of my old life. When I was done, I tentatively ran a hand over my calf. My breath caught in my throat. It was smooth, impossibly, unbelievably smooth. My own skin felt alien to me. Sacré. I stepped out of the shower and dried off, and the friction of the towel against my legs was a completely new sensation, so sensitive it almost tickled. I couldn't stop touching my legs. This simple change was more profound than I could have imagined. This was skin that could belong to her. Next, Mum handed me a bottle of body lotion, vanilla bean and shea butter. "Moisturize," she ordered. "Feminine skin is soft skin." The lotion was cool and creamy, and as I massaged it into my legs, my arms, my chest, the sweet warm scent enveloped me. It was more than just a smell. It was an identity. It was the scent of my mother, of my cousin Sarah, of every woman I had ever secretly envied. I wasn't just putting on lotion. I was anointing myself, preparing my body for a transformation that was as much sensory as it was visual. 2. The foundation of feeling. "All right, the next step is important," Mom said, her voice dropping. She opened one of her dresser drawers and pulled out 2 items, laying them on the counter like sacred artifacts. The first was a pair of panties. They were a delicate, nude-colored lace, not overtly sexy, but elegant and soft to the touch. The second was a simple, wireless bralette in a matching shade. "Turn around," she said, sensing my sudden, overwhelming shyness. I faced the wall, my cheeks burning. I let the towel drop to the floor. My hands shook as I picked up the panties. The lace felt like a spider's web against my fingertips. I stepped into them, one leg at a time, and pulled them up. The sensation was a shock to my system. I was used to the loose, rough cotton of boxers. This was something else entirely. The fabric hugged my hips, light but secure. It was a feeling of being gently held, of being defined in a way I had never been before. Then the bralette. Say. I fumbled with it, trying to figure out which way was front. Mom, hearing my struggle, said gently, "Straps over your shoulders, like a backpack." I slipped it on. The thin elastic band settled snugly under my chest. I knew logically that it served no purpose. I had nothing to support, but that wasn't the point. Psychologically, it changed everything. It created a line, a boundary. It was a piece of architecture that began to build a new silhouette. "Okay, you can look now," she said. I turned and faced the mirror. I saw a boy with smooth legs wearing women's underwear. But the sight didn't trigger the usual wave of self-loathing. The combination of the smooth skin, the delicate lace, and the soft lines of the bralette had created a subtle shift. The image was softer, more androgynous. It was a starting point. "How does it feel?" Mom asked, her eyes searching mine in the reflection. "It feels right," I whispered, the admission startling me with its simple truth. It feels like my body is finally wearing the right thing. 3. Painting a new face. "Sit," she instructed, pointing to the cushioned stool at her vanity. This was the part that terrified and excited me in equal measure. I sat, my back ramrod straight, and watched in the mirror as she laid out an arsenal of brushes, tubes, and palettes. She became a different person, an artist studying her canvas. "Okay, close your eyes." Her fingers were surprisingly gentle as she applied a cool primer to my face. "Your skin is good, Evana. We don't need to hide it, just enhance it." She worked methodically, a light layer of foundation, stippled on with a damp sponge, evened out my skin tone, and muted the shadow on my upper lip. The feeling of the makeup on my skin was strange, like a second, more perfect skin was being painted over my own. Then came a dusting of translucent powder that smelled faintly of roses. It took away the shine, making my face look softer, almost velvety. "A little contouring," she murmured, more to herself than to me. She used a darker powder to subtly shade the hollows of my cheeks and the sides of my nose, and a lighter one to highlight my cheekbones. "See, it slims the face, makes it less angular." The most transformative part was the eyes. She painstakingly curled my eyelashes, a bizarre pinching sensation that made my eyes water. "Look up," she commanded, and then carefully applied mascara. Stroking the tiny brush from the base of my lashes to the tips, the effect was instantaneous. My eyes, which I had always thought were small and unremarkable, suddenly looked larger, more open, framed by a dark fringe. My eyelashes felt heavy, and every blink was a conscious, deliberate motion. Finally, she chose a lipstick. It was a muted, rosy pink. "Pout slightly," she said. She carefully painted my lips, defining the Cupid's bow. "Now, press them together, gently." I did, and the sensation of the slick, creamy color transferring from one lip to the other was incredibly intimate. My mouth suddenly felt like the most prominent feature on my face, soft, defined, and undeniably feminine. 4. Draping the form. "Okay, the final piece," Mom said, a note of nervous excitement in her voice. She led me into her bedroom, where an outfit was laid out on the bed. It wasn't a costume, it was a real, considered outfit. A simple, form-fitting knit dress in a warm beige color, with long sleeves and a modest neckline that fell to just above my knees. Next to it was a long, open-front cardigan in a soft, creamy white. And on the floor, a pair of low block-heeled pumps, maybe 3 centimeters high, in a matching nude color. I slipped the dress over my head. The stretchy fabric clung to my body, smoothing over the bralette and panties, creating a continuous flowing line from my shoulders to my knees. The long sleeves hid my somewhat muscular arms, and the knit texture felt comforting against my skin. The cardigan was the masterstroke. When I put it on, its soft, flowing fabric draped over my shoulders, visually narrowing them and adding a layer of softness and movement. Then, the shoes. I slid my feet into them. They were tight. My feet, used to sneakers, felt compressed. I stood up and immediately wobbled. Heels change your posture, Mum explained, steadying me with a hand on my arm. You have to shift your weight, stand up straighter. It makes your legs look longer and your steps smaller. I took a few tentative steps on the plush carpet. I felt taller, more precarious. The simple act of walking, something I had done my whole life, was suddenly a complex balancing act. The heels forced a different gait, a slight sway in my hips that I had never felt before. My feet felt delicate. The combination of sensations was overwhelming. The smooth skin, the gentle hug of the underwear, the weight of the makeup, the cling of the dress, the precarious balance of the heels. It was a total sensory recalibration. My body was sending 1,000 new signals to my brain, and I was dizzy with the input: fear, shame, curiosity, and a dizzying, electric excitement were all churning inside me, a chaotic cocktail of emotion. I wasn't just a boy in a dress anymore. I was something new, something in the process of being born. That's me, but it's also not me. There's one last thing, Mum said, her voice hushed with anticipation. She went to the top of her closet and pulled down a box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a wig on a styrofoam head. It wasn't a cheap party store wig. It was a beautiful piece, shoulder length with soft, loose waves and gentle, side-swept bangs. The color was a rich, chocolate brown with subtle auburn highlights that caught the light. This is our biggest challenge, she admitted. Hiding your hair. Come here. I sat back down at the vanity. She took a flesh-toned wig cap and stretched it over my head, carefully tucking in every strand of my short, dark hair. The cap was tight, compressing my hair against my scalp. It felt like I was being prepped for surgery. My own identity was being tucked away, hidden from view. Then, she lifted the wig from its stand. She held it for a moment, and I could see her hands were trembling slightly. This was the point of no return. With a deep breath, she gently lowered it onto my head. The weight of it was the first thing I noticed. It wasn't heavy, but it was present. A soft, warm weight that settled over my skull. Then came the feel of the synthetic fibers brushing against my neck and cheeks. I had never felt hair there before. The sensation was utterly alien, and yet, somehow, deeply familiar, as if from a dream. Mom's fingers went to work, adjusting the part, fluffing the waves, and carefully arranging the bangs to sweep across my forehead, concealing my naturally lower, masculine hairline. She combed through the strands with her fingers, her touch as gentle as if it were my own hair. Okay, she whispered. Her work done. She stepped back from the vanity chair. Her eyes were wide, and I saw a tear glisten at the corner of one of them. Stand up. Go look in the full-length mirror. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My legs felt like they were made of jelly. I stood up, the low heels making the movement feel both graceful and clumsy. I turned and walked the few steps to the large, gilded mirror that stood in the corner of her bedroom. For a moment, I squeezed my eyes shut. I was terrified. What if, after all this, I still just saw a man in a costume? What if the reflection was a grotesque parody, a confirmation of all my deepest fears that I was just a freak? The image of myself in Sarah's ill-fitting dress flashed in my mind, the awkward boy playing dress-up. Open your eyes. Honey, Mom's voice was a soft encouragement from behind me. I took a breath that felt like it was drawn from the very bottom of my lungs, and I opened my eyes. The world tilted. The air rushed out of me in a silent gasp. Evan was gone. The person staring back at me was a stranger, a girl. She was tall, yes, and her shoulders were maybe a little broader than most. but the cardigans softened them, made them look delicate. The wig framed a face that was oval and soft, the bangs hiding any hint of a boyish forehead. The makeup had done its work, making her eyes look huge and expressive, with a hint of sadness in their depths. Her lips were full and pink, slightly parted in an expression of pure shock. The beige dress skimmed a body that seemed to have acquired curves that weren't there an hour ago. It wasn't perfection. It wasn't a magazine model. It was a real girl. A slightly awkward, shy-looking girl who was staring at herself as if she'd seen a ghost. I lifted a hand to my face, my fingers trembling. The girl in the mirror did the same. I touched the soft fiber of the wig. She did. 2. I ran a hand down the knit of the dress, feeling the new outline of my body. It was my hand, my body, but the image it was connected to was utterly new. A profound sense of dislocation washed over me, a dizzying vertigo. This was me. And yet, it was not me at all. Who is that? I whispered, my voice raspy with emotion. My own voice sounded wrong coming from her lips. Mom came to stand behind me, placing her hands gently on my shoulders. Her reflection appeared next to the girl's. She looked at the girl in the mirror, not at me, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across her face. "Well," she said softly, her voice thick with unshed tears, "what's her name?" The question struck me with the force of a physical blow. Her name. She needed a name. For years, she had been a nameless, faceless ache in my heart, a fantasy, a ghost. But now, she was standing right here. She was real. She needed a name to anchor her to this world. A name I had whispered to myself in the dark for years surfaced in my mind. A name I had written down in notebooks and then furiously scribbled out. A beautiful, simple name that felt like home. My heart hammered against the soft lace of the bralette. "Elise?" I breathed, the name feeling both sacred and terrifying on my tongue. Her name is Elise. The moment I said it, something clicked into place. The dislocated feeling began to subside, replaced by an overwhelming, tidal wave of emotion. It was recognition. It was release. It was the feeling of finally, after a lifetime of searching, finding a piece of myself I thought was lost forever. I was looking at myself, the real me. Tears began to stream down my face, silently tracing paths through the foundation. But these weren't the desperate, ugly tears from the bathroom floor. These were tears of profound, soul-shaking relief. I had spent my entire life feeling like a poorly written character in someone else's story. But Elise felt like the protagonist. She felt like she deserved to exist. She deserved to be happy. And for the first time, looking at her reflection, I believed that I did, too. One step out the door, and my heart felt like it was going to fall right out of my chest. I spent the next hour just being Elise. It was an exercise in discovery. I sat on my mum's bed, learning how to cross my legs in a dress without showing anything. I discovered the instinct to keep my knees pressed together, a posture that felt surprisingly natural. I walked around the room, getting used to the gentle click of the heels on the hardwood floor and the subtle sway of my hips required to maintain balance. I even practiced picking something up off the floor, learning to bend at the knees in a graceful crouch rather than at the waist. Every small movement was a revelation. I took dozens of selfies with my phone, tilting my head, trying out a shy smile, then a more confident one. Looking at the pictures, I felt a giddy sense of detachment. I was looking at photos of a cute girl, and that girl was me. I would stare at a photo until the illusion solidified, until I could no longer see the boy underneath. Those were the best moments. But as the initial euphoria began to settle, a restless energy took its place. I was living in a bubble, a safe, contained fantasy in my mother's bedroom. But Elise didn't feel like a fantasy anymore. She felt real, and real people don't stay locked in a room. "Mom," I said, my voice still a little shaky, "I want to go outside." My mother, who had been watching me with a mixture of awe and anxiety, looked startled. "Outside, Elise. Honey, Are you sure it's the middle of the day? People are out. Just for a little bit, I pleaded, the urge suddenly overwhelming. To the end of the block and back. I need to feel the sun. I need to know if the world will crumble if I step into it. I needed to know if Elise could exist beyond the reflection in the mirror. She chewed on her lower lip, her brow furrowed with worry. I could see the internal debate raging in her eyes. It was a huge risk. But then, she seemed to see the desperate need in my expression. She let out a long, slow breath. Okay, she said, her voice firming with resolve. Just around the block. I will be right by your side the entire time. If anyone talks to us, you don't say much. Let me handle it. You're my niece, visiting from Portland. You're quiet. Okay, I agreed, my heart starting to pound. She handed me a small, simple black leather purse. You need this. A woman never leaves the house without her purse. I took it, my fingers fumbling with the strap. It felt like a prop, a piece of a costume, but it also felt like a shield. I clutched it to my chest like a lifeline. We walked to the front door. With every step, the fear mounted. This was insane. What were we thinking? Someone would see me. Someone would know. They would point. They would laugh. They would call me names. The litany of my deepest fears played on a loop in my head. My mum put her hand on the doorknob and looked at me, her eyes asking one last time if I was sure. I gave her a small, terrified nod. She opened the door. The sunlight was the first thing that hit me. It felt different, warmer on my made-up face. Then the air, a gentle autumn breeze, swirled around my bare legs below the hem of my dress. It was the most extraordinary sensation. In jeans and shorts, my legs were always insulated from the world. Now, I could feel the air moving against my skin. A cool, intimate caress that made the fine hairs I couldn't see stand on end. It made me feel incredibly vulnerable, but also thrillingly alive. We stepped onto the porch. The world looked impossibly bright and loud. The chirping of birds, the distant hum of a lawnmower, the sound of kids playing down the street, it all felt amplified, as if my senses were heightened. Mom took my arm, a gesture of both support and possession. We walked down the driveway and onto the sidewalk. The sound of my heels, a soft click-clack on the concrete, was deafening to my own ears. I was sure it was announcing my fraudulence to the entire neighborhood. I kept my head down, focusing on placing one foot in front of the other, my knuckles white where I gripped the purse strap. We walked past the first few houses in silence. A car drove by, and I instinctively shrank behind my mom, convinced the driver was staring, analyzing, judging. Then, up ahead, I saw our neighbor, Mr. Henderson, tending to his prize-winning rose bushes. He was a sweet, retired man, but he was notoriously chatty. My blood ran cold. My brain screamed at me to turn back, to run and hide. Just keep walking, Mom murmured, sensing my panic. Smile and nod if he looks up. It was too late. He spotted us. He straightened up, wiping his brow with a gloved hand. And a wide, friendly smile spread across his face. Well, good afternoon, Laura, he called out, his voice booming in the quiet afternoon. His gaze then shifted to me, standing half hidden behind my mom. His smile didn't falter. It was just curious. My entire body froze. My throat closed up. He knows. Oh God, he knows. He sees the jaw, the shoulders. He sees the boy. And who is this lovely young lady, he asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Don't believe I've had the pleasure. The words hit me like a physical force. Lovely young lady. He wasn't being sarcastic. He wasn't being cruel. He genuinely saw a girl he didn't recognize. Time seemed to slow down. The validation in that simple, throwaway comment from a near stranger was more potent than anything I had felt all day. It was one thing to see Elise in the mirror in a controlled environment. It was another thing entirely to have her seen and accepted without question by the outside world. Mum squeezed my arm gently. A signal to play along. This is my niece, Elise, she said, her voice smooth and casual. She's visiting from Portland for a few days. I felt Mr. Henderson's friendly gaze on me. I knew I had to say something. I forced myself to lift my head and managed a small wobbly smile. I pitched my voice a little higher than normal, hoping it sounded soft and feminine. It's nice to meet you. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you too. Elise, he beamed. Welcome to the neighborhood. You picked a beautiful day for a visit. Thank you, I squeaked. We continued our walk, and I didn't dare look back. Once we were a safe distance away, I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. A giddy, hysterical laugh bubbled up from my chest. He didn't know. I whispered to my mum, my voice filled with disbelief and elation. He didn't even hesitate. He called me lovely. Mum smiled, a real radiant smile of relief and pride. That's because you are, honey. The rest of the walk was a dream. I felt like I was floating. I lifted my head, no longer staring at the pavement. I looked at the houses, the trees, the sky. The fear hadn't vanished completely, but it was now overshadowed by a powerful, soaring sense of joy. For a few precious minutes, on a quiet suburban street, I wasn't a boy in a dress. I was just Elise, taking a walk with her aunt on a beautiful autumn afternoon, and it was the most wonderful feeling in the world. The truth always chooses the worst possible moment to knock on the door. The walk around the block had changed the atmosphere in the house. The nervous tension had evaporated, replaced by a giddy, conspiratorial joy. We were a team. We had a secret, and we had succeeded in our first mission. When we got back inside, I didn't want to take the clothes off. I wanted to prolong the feeling, to live as Elise for just a little longer. Can I stay like this? I asked Mum, my voice hopeful. Just until dinner. She looked at me, at the genuine happiness radiating from my face, a look she hadn't seen in years. She hesitated for only a second. All right, she conceded with a smile. But let's touch up your makeup. Your little cry of joy smudged your mascara. We went back to her bathroom, laughing. I sat at the vanity, and she showed me how to use a cotton swab and a bit of makeup remover to fix the smudges without having to start over. I was reapplying a fresh coat of the rosy pink lipstick, carefully tracing the outline of my lips, feeling a burgeoning sense of confidence. I was getting the hang of this. I was learning the little rituals, the small acts of maintenance that went into being a woman. In that moment, I felt completely, utterly happy. And that's when we heard it. The distinct metallic sound of a key sliding into the front door lock. The heavy thump clack of the deadbolt being turned. My hand jerked, sending a streak of pink lipstick across my cheek. I froze, the lipstick wand held aloft. My eyes met Mom's in the mirror. The color drained from her face. A familiar voice, cheerful and oblivious, echoed from the foyer. Laura. I'm home. Traffic from the airport was a breeze. I caught an earlier flight. Figured I'd surprise you. My dad, my father, Marcus Miller, was home, a full day early. A cold, paralyzing terror seized me. It was so absolute, so primal, that for a second, I couldn't breathe or move. The happy, confident girl in the mirror vanished, replaced by a trapped animal. Oh my God, I hissed, my voice a strangled whisper. I scrambled up from the vanity stool, knocking it over with a clatter. Mom, he can't see me. He can't see me like this. My mum snapped into action. Quick! In my bedroom. Stay there, don't make a sound, she ordered. Her voice low and urgent. She practically shoved me out of the bathroom and toward her room, closing the door softly behind me. I stood in the middle of her bedroom, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. I could hear my dad's footsteps coming down the hall, the familiar heavy tread that now sounded like the approach of doom. "Hey," he said, his voice closer now. "What was that noise? Everything okay?" "Just dropped something," Mum replied, her voice impressively steady. "Welcome home, honey. I wasn't expecting you." I pressed my ear against the cool wood of the door, straining to hear. I was trapped. There was no other exit. My mind raced, trying to find a way out, but there was none. I was a cornered fox, and the hunter was in the house. "Yeah, the convention wrapped up early," he was saying. I heard the sound of his briefcase hitting the kitchen counter. I was going to call, but I figured, why not make it a surprise? "What are you up to? Is that powder in the air?" My blood ran cold. He had noticed. In our haste, we had left the evidence of our transformation all over the bathroom. A dusting of face powder, the scent of hairspray, the open makeup palettes. "Just doing a little deep cleaning," Mum said. It was a weak lie, and we both knew it. There was a pause. I could picture him, standing in the kitchen, his brow furrowed. He was a detective by nature, a man who noticed when things were out of place. "And what's this?" he asked. I heard a small shuffling sound. "Did you buy new shoes? These are tiny." He had found the heels. I had kicked them off near the hallway. A rookie mistake. My stomach twisted into a painful knot. The silence that followed stretched for an eternity. He was putting the pieces together, the strange answers, the lingering smell of perfume, a pair of women's shoes that weren't my mum's size. He wasn't angry yet. He was confused, and in some ways, that was worse. I heard my mum let out a long, shaky sigh, the sound of surrender. "Marcus," she said, and her voice was different now. It was serious, stripped of all pretense. "We need to talk. There's something you need to know. Something you need to see." "Laura, you're scaring me. What's going on?" "Our son is in a lot of pain." "Marcus," she said, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "He's been hiding something for a very long time. Today he needed to try something. He needed to try and live as he feels inside, as a girl, and you need to see him. You need to see her. To understand." My heart stopped. She was going to do it. She was going to make me face him. I heard his footsteps approaching the bedroom door. I backed away, stumbling over a rug, until my back hit the far wall. There was nowhere left to run. The doorknob began to turn. This was it. The end of my world. The moment my father would see what I truly was. And I was certain, with a cold, sickening finality, that he would hate what he saw. It's not that I have a daughter now. It's that I still have my child, just in a different form. The door swung open. My father stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the brighter light of the hallway. He looked from my mom, who stood beside him with a protective, defiant look on her face, to me, cowering against the far wall. His eyes scanned me from head to toe. He took in the wavy brown hair, the carefully made-up face, the beige dress clinging to my frame, the low heels. I watched his face as he processed the impossible image before him. I saw confusion warring with disbelief. His gaze was methodical, like he was trying to solve a complex equation. He saw the familiar shape of my eyes, the line of my jaw beneath the foundation. But they were trapped in an utterly alien context. He didn't speak for what felt like a lifetime. The only sound in the room was my own ragged breathing. I couldn't look him in the eye. My gaze was fixed on the floor. My hands twisted together so tightly my knuckles ached. I wanted the floor to open up and swallow me whole. "Evan," he finally said, his voice a raw, bewildered whisper. The name was a question, not a statement. He was asking if the boy he knew was still in there somewhere. I flinched, the sound of my old name hitting me like a slap. I squeezed my eyes shut, and a single tear escaped, tracing a hot path down my cheek. "Her name is Elise," Mum said softly but firmly from the doorway. My dad's head snapped toward her, then back to me. "Elise," he repeated. the name foreign and clumsy on his tongue. He took a hesitant step into the room. His eyes, never leaving me. Laura, what is this? Is this a joke? Some kind of prank? Does he look like he's joking? Marcus, she shot back, her voice sharp with a mother's fierce protectiveness. Look at him. Look at her. She's terrified. That seemed to break through his confusion. He looked at me again. But this time, he wasn't just seeing the clothes and makeup. He was seeing the trembling hands, the bowed head, the sheer unadulterated terror radiating from me. He was seeing his child in distress. I finally summoned the courage to look up at him. My vision was blurry with tears. I'm sorry. Dad! I choked out, my voice high and thin. I'm so sorry you had to see this. I couldn't stand being him anymore. Not today. My apology, my raw and honest pain, seemed to land a blow. He ran a hand over his face, down his tired eyes and mouth. He looked utterly lost, like his whole world had been tilted off its axis. He took another step toward me, and I instinctively pressed myself harder against the wall. He stopped dead. He saw my flinch, and I saw the flicker of deep hurt in his eyes. The realization that I was afraid of him seemed to pain him more than the sight of me in a dress. You think I'm going to hit you? He asked, his voice cracking with emotion. I couldn't answer. I just shook my head numbly. Tears streaming down my face now. Oh God, he breathed, looking from me to my mom and back again. He looked like he had aged 10 years in the last 5 minutes. He closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath, as if trying to steady himself. When he opened them again, the shock had been replaced by a profound, heartbreaking sadness. I don't understand this. Evan, Elise. He stumbled over the name. The effort clear. I'm not going to pretend I do. I'm a simple man. I fix engines. I watch football. This is not in my vocabulary. It's not. He took another slow step toward me, his hands held up in a placating gesture, as if approaching a frightened animal. But, he continued, his voice thick and low, you are my child, and you are standing in this room looking more scared than I have ever seen you in your entire life. And whatever else I am not a man who wants his kid to be afraid of him. He closed the remaining distance between us. I braced myself for, I don't know what, a lecture, yelling, disappointment. Instead, he wrapped his arms around me. It was the most awkward hug of my life. I was stiff and rigid, my body a foreign landscape of soft fabrics and strange shapes. I smelled of vanilla lotion and hairspray. He smelled of airplane air and the familiar, comforting scent of his aftershave. He held me tightly, his hand coming up to gently cup the back of my head, his fingers sinking into the synthetic hair of the wig. I don't get it, he whispered, his voice hoarse against my ear. But I don't want to lose you. If this is who you are, then we'll figure it out. Okay, your mama and me, we'll figure it out together. His words, his acceptance, however confused and conditional, was the key that unlocked the last of my composure. A sob tore through me, a sound of grief and gratitude, and 1,000 other emotions I couldn't name. I collapsed against his chest, clutching his jacket, and cried like I hadn't cried since I was a small child. He just held me, patting my back awkwardly, letting me cry it all out. It wasn't a perfect magical moment of instant understanding. It was clumsy and painful and deeply, profoundly real. But in that awkward, tear-soaked embrace, I felt the foundations of my world, which I had been so sure were crumbling, begin to settle into a new, uncertain, but hopeful shape. I wasn't losing my family. I was just beginning to show them who I really was. This isn't the end of the story. It's just the first page of a new chapter. That evening was a masterclass in awkwardness. The air was thick with unspoken questions and carefully chosen words. Mum insisted that I stay as Elise for dinner. Your father needs to see you. She'd said, not for a minute. He needs to see that this is real. So, I sat at the dinner table in my beige dress and cardigan, my makeup repaired, but my eyes still puffy. My dad sat opposite me. He tried. I'll give him that. He tried to make conversation about his trip, but his gaze kept flicking toward me, as if he were trying to memorize this new version of his child. He'd catch himself staring at the way I held my fork, or how I'd instinctively tuck a loose strand of the wig's hair behind my ear. He called me Ev once, caught himself, and then just fell silent for a long time. It was painful, but it was also a start. He didn't storm out. He didn't ignore me. He stayed. He was present in the discomfort, and that felt like a monumental victory. After we cleared the dishes, Mom came with me back to her room. It was time to deconstruct Elise. The process felt different this time. It wasn't a shameful hiding of evidence. It was a careful, almost reverent packing away of a precious part of myself. Taking off the wig was the hardest part. As I lifted it off, the cool air hitting my scalp, I felt a tangible sense of loss. It was like taking off a piece of my identity. I placed it gently back on its stand, smoothing its hair. "We'll get you your own," Mom said softly from behind me. "A better one. And all the things you need." The words were a promise. This wasn't a one-time experiment. This was the beginning of something. Wiping off the makeup was a slow, deliberate process. With each swipe of the cotton pad, a feature of Elise vanished, and a feature of Evan returned. But as I looked at the boy's face emerging in the mirror, something had changed. He didn't look like a stranger anymore. He didn't look like the enemy. He looked softer. His eyes, free of mascara and liner, seemed to hold the memory of Elise's gaze. He looked like a boy who held a beautiful, hopeful secret. Mom took the dress and cardigan, folded them carefully, and placed them in a special box she labeled Elise. She put it on the top shelf of her own closet. "She'll be safe here until you need her again," she said. Finally, I was back in my own room, wearing my familiar baggy t-shirt and boxer shorts. The rough cotton felt abrasive against my smooth, lotioned skin. I felt the phantom sensation of the bralettes band under my chest, the ghost of the dress's hem against my knees. My body remembered her, even if the mirror no longer showed her. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked over to the window and looked out at the quiet, sleeping street, the same street where, just hours before, I had walked as Elise and felt the wind on my legs for the first time. It seemed like a lifetime ago. So much had happened. I had confessed my deepest secret. I had been seen. I had been accepted. In a messy, complicated, but real way. By the two most important people in my life. The journey ahead was long and undoubtedly difficult. There was school to think about, friends, relatives, the entire world outside the safe walls of my home. The fear was still there, a low hum beneath the surface of my relief. This was not a magic fix. I was not suddenly cured or whole. But as I looked at my faint reflection in the dark glass of the window, I didn't feel the familiar, crushing despair. I didn't hate the boy looking back at me. I saw him now as a part of the story, not the whole thing. He was the vessel, the protector of the precious, fragile girl who was just beginning to find her voice. "Good night, Elise," I whispered to the reflection in the glass. And for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of peace settle over me, because I knew, deep in my heart, that this wasn't the end. It wasn't even the beginning of the end. It was, perhaps, the end of the beginning. Elise was real, and she would be back. This was her story. And it was only just getting started.